Welcome to Books and Beyond. I'm Larry Zaccaro, and I'm the guest host this week. The purpose of this show is to help creative people personify their aspirations. I want to start off by thanking SECTV and Frank for producing this show and all shows. And typically we would be face-to-face in the studio, but like everyone else, we're conducting our shows and meetings on Zoom for the time being. Just start off with a couple of announcements briefly. I am a member of SECAPA Southeast, and that is the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association of Southeastern Connecticut. We meet on the third Monday of every month. So this month, our meeting on Zoom will be on July 20th. Now, over the past month or so, we've conducted a children's book contest where members have submitted their material, and the winner will be announced on that July 20th meeting. To get the link to that, we go to our Facebook page, SECAPA Southeast, and look for the Zoom link for that meeting. Well, who am I? I'm filling in as guest host today, so we can talk to the host most of the time, Jim Bennett, but a little bit about me. I am actually a member of SECAPA, like I said. I'm also an officer at a local Toastmasters club, Mystic Aquarium Toastmasters. We meet twice a month, second and fourth Wednesday of every month, and we're meeting on Zoom as well. And if you'd like to find the links for those meetings, that is also on our Facebook page. I've done some writing myself. I've invented a children's educational game called Wordplay, whereas you make words with with letters on cards and get points to win the game. I've written a children's book called Amy and New Yorka, which is available on Amazon, and I've just released a science fiction novel called Convergent, which is also available on Amazon, and have just completed a new novel, a comedy called Chandler's List, that should be available on Amazon sometime in August. That's enough about me. So I would like to introduce our guest today, Jim Bennett, also known as James Michael Walker, the title, the author's name he uses for his books. Jim writes mysteries, all centered around William Gillette and Gillette's Castle. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to Jim Bennett and let him talk about himself some more. Jim?
Hey, Larry, how are you? Hey, I thank you very much for this. It's been a long time since I've actually been interviewed. So it's a treat for me. Yes, I do write mysteries. My books are centered at Gillette's Castle, the surrounding area, and the life of William Gillette. William Gillette was a famous stage actor in the late 1800s and early 1900s. He would be comparable to Tom Cruise in this day and age. He was hugely popular. He was also quite an interesting man. He was a screenwriter. He wrote plays. He invented all kinds of sound effects. He held a few patents for various stage effects. But what he's probably, was remembered for in history, two things he's remembered for in history is he brought Sherlock Holmes to life. He brought Sherlock Holmes off the pages of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's books and gave him, personified him on stage to America and became wildly popular. And the other thing is, his lasting monument was Gillette's Castle that he built in East Haddam. It is now a state park. It is a beautiful state park on 117 acres. It's a stone castle built from native stone that they quarried here in Connecticut. And there's so many interesting features to go into right now, but I urge everybody to go up there and check out the park. Unfortunately, due to COVID, I don't think that the castle is actually open for tours on the inside, but the outside is beautiful and the area is beautiful. You can see where he built his own train, a miniature train that went a few miles along his property. That's still, you can see where the tracks were, and you can see the engine in the visitor center. It's it's quite a fascinating thing, and that's how gives me a lot of material and a lot of ideas for my stories.
Now, Jim, was he born in Connecticut? What drew him to this area?
He was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was actually, there's a famous founding family called the Hookers. I think he was related to them in some ways. He had a brother that was a state senator. He had a lot of very deep ties here in Connecticut. Though he traveled extensively and he lived in a few places, Gillette's Castle was the first actual permanent home he had.
So he acted in the Midwest, if I remember correctly, for a lot of his early career, and then gradually moved eastward.
Yes.
Great. Well, so what got you interested in him as a focal point for your writing to center your mysteries around? Was something that happened when you were very young, or that you?
Actually, really what happened is kind of interesting story is that about, must be 30 years ago, Larry, I wrote my first book. And it was basically, I had the idea of Sherlock Holmes coming to America and actually staying at William Gillette's castle. And the idea was sort of to blend the real Sherlock Holmes detective with the man that played him on stage. And I kind of worked the mystery around that. But, I wrote the book. It was fun to do. I printed a couple copies up, or had a couple copies printed. And then I put it in the trunk and I kind of forgot about it. And, life has a way of just tying you up, between children and work and everything else. I never really got back to it. And then later on in life, maybe about 7, 8, 9 years ago, I decided that, one of the things that I wanted to do was publish a book. I wanted to be a published author, So I pulled it out and I started looking at it and I started doing more research. But the more research I did about William Gillette, then I realized that William Gillette really was Sherlock Holmes in so many ways. The interesting part about this is, and I learned this, was he had his friend who I use as my Watson, a man named Charles Frohman, who was a famous stage producer. He had a huge theater syndicate along the Eastern Seaboard, and then he expanded into Europe. And when he was in London, he met Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And he introduced Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to William Gillette. And Gillette said, "Hey, would you mind if I, use Sherlock Holmes in a story, or for a play?" And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle at the time had killed off Sherlock Holmes, and said, "Sure, I don't care what you do with him. Marry him, kill him, do whatever you want with him. I'm through with it." But he needed the money, so William wrote his first Sherlock Holmes play. And it was a huge success in America. I mean, it was just like one of those exploding phenomenons. And after that, he, kept writing and stuff. But I think that that's even really part of the reason why Sir Arthur Conan Doyle brought Sherlock Holmes back, because he saw the money that William Gillette was making, and he wanted more money. He needed money, so he brought him back. And then, of course, they were both very successful. So the thing about the Sherlock Holmes, though, is that, especially as we see him and we think about him, is so much of that is from William Gillette. The deerstalker cap, the cape, the briar pipe, those were all things that William Gillette added to the character. In fact, the famous saying, "Elementary, my dear Watson," Sir Arthur Conan Doyle actually never wrote those words. It was a paraphrase of another thing he said, where he said, "Well, that is elementary, my dear Watson," and he went on to explain something. But "elementary, my dear Watson" was actually uttered by William Gillette. And I think that the other thing is when you see Sherlock Holmes, though he was portrayed in the Strand magazines, and people sort of maybe had a vague idea But just let me hold this up. If you see right here, that's William Gillette, and then that's William Gillette as Sherlock Holmes. And when you see that, it's instantly recognizable as Sherlock Holmes. And a lot of the illustrations and depictions that we see today, are actually of William Gillette.
It really is one of the most iconic figures in literature, on stage, and still in movies. And as you correctly point out, one of the most recognizable figures in fiction, with the cap, with the curved pipe, and there's even a TV series recently, right, called Elementary,
Yep.
based on that, and based on that famous saying. So Gillette actually wrote the first play and produced it, and as I understand it, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was kind of done with him, had written him out of his life, and didn't expect anything. And because of the success of Gillette's play and the Americas, he got back into writing more, right?
Right.
Through that a bit. That's very interesting. Kind of like one of the most iconic figures in literature. So tell us about writing your first book with Gillette. Was that anything like the one that you wrote quite a while ago, or when you brought it back, did you give it a new life?
Not quite. I mean, actually, the original crime was the same almost, but how it came about and how it was solved was changed completely. And I had an epiphany of one of the major plot themes, and that helped a lot. And then, I read that too, that actually William Gillette actually had a little bit of Sherlock Holmes in him. He had the ability, like he used to entertain people at parties and stuff by, he'd look at somebody and go, "Oh, I see you got a new cat," or, pull all these little interesting facts out that just by observing them, seeing the little nuances, and it used to amaze people. So
he would decipher just from little
he would just
evidence
whatever. And I just thought, wow, that's what I mean, that this guy really was Sherlock Holmes.
Were you able to incorporate a lot of those characteristics into your writing to give the main character those kind of characteristics, that kind of ability to decipher from little hints?
Yes, I did. And, from what I've read about William Gillette, he was a, handsome, charismatic, a gentleman at all times. And so obviously I don't know the man, and he's been gone for, 75 years. So there's no way of really telling how he was as a person. But I tried to incorporate the descriptions that people gave of him into his character. And it's fun for the fact that, I mean, I don't have to be super accurate. A lot of this is my imagination. In fact, I did not go to Gillette's Castle until after I had written the book and published it, because I'd been there when I was a kid, but I was afraid that if I went there, I would change everything all the time. And, I'd never get finished.
When you say change things, try to adapt your settings and your stories based on what you actually saw recently there.
Right. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, the first time I walked up to the castle, I said, "Oh, I should have done this instead of that,"
In the descriptions of your writings, right?
Yeah.
About the scene itself, right?
Yeah. It's and that's, that's the thing when you're writing a mystery, it's hard to, especially with in a historical context like mine are. I try to incorporate how people were in that time, the era, the settings, all that. And so a lot of it I have to imagine how, it really was. A lot of the stuff that in my book, of course, are real things. His houseboat, the Aunt Polly, of course, the castle, the Connecticut River and the ferry on the Connecticut River. and a lot of characters I tried to include, such as Charles Frohman, who was another fascinating man who I use as his Watson, his portrayer, but the storyteller. But he was a real man. But from what I read, he was probably not very much like I describe him. So that's but that's just
artistic.
Artistic license, right? Yeah.
We've all done that. You kind of tweak the characters to suit what you need
Right.
for your particular story and scene. So yeah, we've all done that. And we also, I could certainly relate. In my books, I don't give too much description. I give a setting, but then the reader's going to kind of put themselves in the scene in their own mind to a point. They're going to see it a certain way. So you kind of guide them and give them a framework. But if you get into too much detail, you kind of maybe just bogs down for the reader. So I understand that completely.
And I as like you say, sometimes too much detail is not good. So I have so much information and I learned so much and it gave me so many ideas that I kind of try to spread it out in the books I write. Instead of dumping it all on the reader in the first book. My first book, The Case of the Flying Corpse, was, that was really, I'm very proud of that. That really came together well. I liked the way the story came out. I liked the solution. I liked how I depicted it, how I laid out the clues. And then in the second book, Accounts of William Gillette, it's a series of short stories, and that I wanted to use to more portray Gillette and his life on the road as an actor in different places, in the stages, on different venues, in different places. And a lot of that I put into the short stories, they're real places, they're real venues, and some were actually real occurrences that I just sort of twisted to my own use, and it's fascinating. I could go on and on and on. I've written 3 books, and then my third book, The Floating Corpse, was a sequel to The Case of the Flying Corpse. It was something that I'd planned on doing even when I was writing the first book, and I'm happy, very, very happy with the way that came out also, because it helps continue the story. But I introduced some new characters, and the times are changing. We're rolling into the roaring 20s, and Gillette's getting older. And I still have couple more books. I think I'm going to do at least 2 more. I'm working on the 4th one right now, and then the 5th one I think will probably be, I'm not sure if it'll be the conclusion or the last story, but I'm going to try to wind it down. By that time, he's going to be well into his 70s, early 80s, and getting close to the end of his life. So,
very interesting. Well, we look forward to those. Let me ask you, I haven't written a mystery. As you're crafting a mystery, do you have the crime that needs to be solved? You must have some kind of resolution in your mind established. How about all the details as you divulge clues to the reader? A lot of that kind of you pull out as you go, or do you have most of that outlined or laid out as you're writing the story, or you don't want to tell?
No, I'll tell. I mean, I think it's sort of half and half. Basically, the way I've done it so far is, especially, in the first book, I had a crime, and I wanted it to be sort of a locked room crime, where how the hell did that happen? So I started with that, and then really the hard part is like working your way backwards, thinking, well, how did it happen? How was it concealed? Blah, blah, blah. And then when you see, you get those occurrences, then you can pull little clues out. that you can put into the story. And believe me, there was a lot of, I'm on chapter 12 and I went back to chapter 1 and put in a couple of lines to make sure that what came up in chapter 12, was available for the reader in chapter 1 or 2 or 3. One of the things, and we've talked about this, and one of the things I'm just not a fan of is I love the old mystery movies, the old Charlie Chans and the Sherlock Holmes, the Charlie Chans, the Poirots and stuff. And I've just never been a fan of the ambush solution where like you're taking in all these clues, you're looking, you can't figure out exactly what's going on. And then in the closing scene, Charlie Chan pulls a telegram out of his pocket and says, well, I just got this telegram yesterday that says that you're not who you say you are. And, the crime is solved. And then you're like, well, I didn't have a shot at this. That ain't fair. And that's, so I've always tried to, when I write, I always try to be sure that the reader could figure it out or get a really, really good idea of what's going on if they pay close attention, which is basically what Sherlock Holmes and William Gillette did as detectives, right?
That's great. So there's clues in there. They might not be obvious, but if they're paying attention, they're picking out little things here. They could piece together what actually happened from subtle clues that you've dropped along the way.
Right.
Then in retrospect, it all has to fit together and make sense as they kind of think back to the story that built up to the final reveal.
Right. It's easier. I mean, it's easy with the fact that when I write as Charles Frohman and I'm describing this adventure that I'm having with William Gillette, you just don't have that sort of mindset. Some people have that very detail-oriented mindset and they can extrapolate from what they see. Other people just sort of go along, you got to hand it to them. And Frohman's more of a kind of the guy that you need to hand it to him. You have to hold that picture up in front of his face before he really sees it. And I'm not saying that he's slow or dumb or anything like that. It's a thought process. And I use, a lot of times you can find some clues or know that it is a clue by how Frohman reacts. Like if he's like, I don't know what he's talking about, then there's probably a clue in there that you need to pay attention to.
So you've mentioned some of the things you don't like in mystery and writers and stories. Who were your favorites growing up besides?
Well, I gotta say, when I got a little older in my teens, I started reading the Sherlock Holmes of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's, and I did love them.
Right.
But one of my favorite writers, I have to say, is Agatha Christie. That old style. Agatha Christie was that way. Her stories all had clues and things in it that, you could figure out if you really, really paid attention, She was very good at not ambushing people at the end with solutions and stuff. And, a lot of, I think, unfortunately, of mystery writers and the mysteries that are portrayed today, they rely a lot on gore, sex, violence, stuff like that. It distracts you from the thought process of the mystery of, trying to figure things out. And they more like, there's various different ways. Robert Parker, who wrote the Spencer theories, Spencer for Hire, and Spencer books, he was more of a just pull on the string. You just kept pulling on the string and then things would come up, and he kept pulling on the string and more things would come up, and finally he'd get to the end of the string. But it isn't like something that you have to think about, or, it holds your interest through the characters and the violence and the action, but not through the actual mystery.
Do you ever pull the crimes that occur from real life? Does a news story or some situation jog an idea for you? I mean,
Well,
you know,
actually, modern day, not so much, because things have changed so much. You know what I mean? I try to stay within that time period of, of the early 1900s. But in actuality, I'll tell you one story. In the book Accounts of William Gillette, there's a story that actually was a true account. Well, not a true account, but what happened was, is I read that this actor was on a stage. They were doing a production of The Three Musketeers, and the prop man accidentally loaded the guns on stage with real bullets instead of props, and he was shot 7 times, and he lived. But I just gave me a great idea for a story.
I could see how you could portray that as done intentionally that nobody else knew about.
Right.
Give anything away. That's great. So I know that we're getting a little bit tight on time here. I know that a couple of very famous writers, Mark Twain and Harriet Beecher Stowe, live side by side in Hartford. So I don't know if Gillette, was he born near them, and did have
Yes, he was.
contact?
He lived in the same neighborhood, actually. And actually, at one point early in Gillette's career, he did a one-man stage act portraying Mark Twain.
Oh, okay.
And Mark Twain actually saw it, went to one of the performances. And Mark Twain afterwards said, "If I wasn't sitting here, I would think I was up there." So, I mean, he was really quite the great actor.
Sounds like a pretty impressive performer, and I invented some lighting techniques and other ways to do effects on stage, as you said. Very impressive. Well, just in our last couple minutes, anything else you want to add or talk about upcoming books or?
Well, we're all stuck here with the COVID. I wish I was out doing events. That's really one of my favorite things, to do book signings. We've done a couple together, Larry. It's always a lot of fun.
The one at the Guard, was that early this year?
Yeah.
Fall? That was a lot of fun.
I can't wait to get back to that. For now, I mean, my books are available at Amazon, and you can find them at Bank Square Books. I think if you order them, but it's a tough time for all of us. So, and that's why I really appreciate you having me on today, Larry. So it's nice to get out and talk about my stuff.
My pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. I guess I think I've made good use of time. I've been locked in the house. I've gotten two books written.
There you go.
I guess that's a pretty good use. A little bit tougher in summer, but all right. So can get close to wrapping it up here. So you have 2 books coming out, or that you're working on one and have an idea for another one. So we'll look forward to those coming up. Excuse me. And I'll remind everyone again of SECAPA meeting, the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association of Southeastern Connecticut. We meet third Monday and 6:30, I believe. We have our links and our meetings in person. So Jim, anything else you want to add, or?
No, I just want to thank you. This has been a really nice edition of Books and Beyond. I appreciate it. I will be back next time. And till then, I mean, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and keep reading.
Okay, Jim, thank you so much for being here today. And again, thanks to SEC TV, and thanks to Frank, who is producing this show even as we speak. And thank you so much, Jimmy, for sharing all the details about your writing and your stories. It's been fun. So
thanks for having me on, Larry. Take care.
My pleasure. Good to be a host. It was a lot of fun talking to you. So thank you. Until next time, thank you very much on Books and Beyond. This is Larry Zaccaro saying goodbye.